My sister said I wasn't welcome at her wedding because I'd flirted with her fiancé. I thought that was the end of it until he stood up at the rehearsal dinner, called her a liar, and walked away from the altar. She tried to ruin my name, smear me across town, and begged me to lie to save her from the fallout. But I took the truth to court, and for once, someone believed me. I'm Michelle, and this is how I stopped being the scapegoat in my own family. I first heard about my sister's wedding from my grandmother. Not from a glossy save the date in the mail. Not a group text from my mom. Not even a tagged engagement post on Facebook. Just a casual sentence from Nana Ruth as she talked about the daffodils blooming early in her front yard. Emily's getting married this May. Did you know that I remember blinking at the cracked paint on my ceiling in Chicago, my phone pressed to my ear, her voice still floating through the speaker like she'd said nothing unusual. I sat up straighter. Wait, what? Emily's getting married to that nice man Gavin from her office. Human resources, I think. It's been in the works for months, sweetheart. You didn't know? No, Nana. I didn't. She hesitated, then like she realized something was off. I could hear the soft creak of her rocking chair, the hush of her garden wind chimes behind her. Oh, honey. I assumed your mom would have told you. Of course, she didn't. Why would she? I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sharp sting of exclusion was already rising in my chest, and if I didn't laugh, I'd let it eat me alive. I ended the call politely and sat there in my tiny studio staring at the steam rising from my forgotten coffee. A whole wedding planned, a whole life event, and not a single word to me. But truthfully, was I surprised? Not really. I had been the ghost at every family event since I moved out at 18. It wasn't always this way though, the signs had been there since we were kids. Emily the golden daughter. I the complication. She was everything my parents wanted. Blonde, organized, a perfectionist with a polished smile and an impeccable transcript. I was quieter, more restless, obsessed with books and strange ideas, always pushing back against expectations I didn't ask for. Mom used to say I was too sensitive anytime I cried, even as a child. Dad would tell me to toughen up, that no one liked a girl who made everything a problem. And Emily. She thrived in that house. I think she always knew she fit better than I did. By the time I got to Northwestern, I stopped trying to belong. I called less. I visited less. I stopped explaining why I didn't come home for Thanksgiving and started spending holidays with friends or holed up with deadlines instead. I wasn't angry, at least not then. I just needed distance. My grandmother was the only one who called regularly. The only one who asked questions and listened long enough to hear the answers. Her voice was a thread that kept me tied to that family, however thin it became. Still, I think I clung to some faint hope that one day things might thaw. That one day something would shift. So when Nana said the word wedding, it stung. Not just because I didn't know, but because it proved I'd been entirely removed from their lives. And yet I still waited. 3 days passed after that call. I told myself maybe they were planning to tell me. Maybe there had been some mistake. Maybe they were going to invite me eventually. Then my phone rang. It was Emily. I stared at her name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the green icon. We hadn't spoken since Christmas, not really. Not after what happened then. Still curiosity won. I answered. Hey. A pause. Her voice was clipped. Hi, Michelle. I sat down on the edge of my bed. So, what's up? I thought we should talk. Okay, I heard her breathe in. Exhale. I don't want you at the wedding. Just like that. Not a hesitation. Not an ounce of discomfort. Just a flat statement, like she was telling me she'd canceled our brunch plans. I waited for her to follow it up with some excuse. A limited guest list, maybe. COVID capacity. Budget issues. But then she said it, because you flirted with Gavin. I blinked. What? At Christmas. You were completely inappropriate. Leaning and laughing too hard at his jokes. The way you looked at him. It was obvious. I almost laughed. Was she serious, Emily? I talked to him like a normal person. We had a 10-minute conversation about travel and work. That's not flirting. You can play dumb if you want, but I saw it. Mom saw it. Others noticed too. I gripped the phone tighter. Who are these others, Emily? No one said a word to me. Gavin certainly didn't act like anything was wrong. Of course he didn't. That's how men are. I stared out the window watching a couple walk their dog along the street below. The ache in my chest deepened, but it wasn't just hurt now. It was anger. You know what I said quietly. If this is how you really see me, maybe it's better I'm not there. There was a beat of silence. Fine, she said. I hung up. Just like that, I was erased. Not forgotten, not overlooked, but actively intentionally erased from one of the most important days in my sister's life. And the worst part, it didn't even shock me. Because deep down, I think I always knew that in their world I was disposable. This only confirmed it. I closed my laptop, poured my cold coffee down the sink, and sat in the quiet for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, going over every detail of the last time I saw Gavin. The only time, really. Christmas at my parents' house in Columbus. It was cold that week, colder than usual, and the roads were slick with ice. I had almost said no when Nana Ruth asked me to come home for the holiday. I hadn't been back in over a year, and the thought of sitting through small talk and judgment over ham and mashed potatoes made my chest tighten. But she asked softly, like she missed me more than she was letting on, and I couldn't tell her no. The house hadn't changed. The same wreath on the door, same stiff plastic place settings shaped like snowflakes. Same lukewarm welcome from my mom, who gave me a side hug before returning to her green bean casserole. My dad barely looked up from the sports recap on television. Emily, of course, was radiant. Fresh blowout manicured nails dress that looked like it cost half a paycheck. She smiled like she owned the room. And then there was Gavin. I'd heard about him in passing. HR at her company's smart successful, owns his condo, drives a Tesla. But I hadn't expected him to be kind. Not fake, polite, not forced nice. Genuinely warm. He offered to take my coat when I walked in. Asked if I wanted tea instead of wine. We ended up seated across from each other at dinner. My mom was busy praising Emily for organizing a charity drive at work. My dad asked Gavin something about golf, which he politely answered before turning to me. So Michelle, I heard you edit books. I nodded. Mostly nonfiction. Memoirs, personal development, the occasional ghostwriting project. That's really cool. He smiled. I'd never met someone who actually edits books. I always imagined it was just a red pen and long hours in dusty libraries. I laughed, surprised by how at ease I felt. Pretty close, actually. Minus the dust. He asked questions. Not in that performative way some people do when they want to look interested. He was genuinely curious. What kind of clients I worked with, what made a good manuscript, if I ever thought about writing my own. We talked about a ridiculous self-help author who kept confusing metaphors and thought burning bridges was a positive thing. Gavin laughed so hard he nearly choked on his cider. Across the table, I saw Emily stiffen. Her smile faded. She stared at me for a long beat, then looked down at her plate like it had offended her. I tried not to think too much of it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was annoyed that Gavin wasn't focused solely on her. After dinner, I helped Nana Ruth dry dishes. Emily disappeared upstairs. Gavin stayed behind to help put away leftovers, and I went to the living room to warm up near the fire. That's when she found me. Michelle. I turned. She was standing by the hallway, arms folded across her chest, jaw set. Come with me. She didn't wait. Just walked toward the hallway, and I followed, confused. She led me into the den and closed the door behind her. What was that? I frowned. What was what? At dinner. The laughing, the leaning, and the stupid flirting. I blinked. Emily, I was just talking to him. You think I didn't see the way you tilted your head, the way you batted your lashes? You always act innocent, but you love attention. Especially mine. That's not true. She stepped closer. You always hated that I had more friends, more praise, more of everything. Now you're going after Gavin. I laughed, but it came out sharp. Are you serious? Don't play dumb. He's your fiancé, Emily. I barely know the guy. Exactly. And look how fast you jumped into his space. I stood there stunned. She was actually serious. The idea that a 10-minute conversation about editing and awkward metaphors meant I was seducing her future husband was so far from reality it almost felt like a joke. I wasn't flirting. She scoffed. Maybe you didn't mean to. Or maybe you did. You always had a thing for men who didn't belong to you. That hit like a slap. I stepped back. I don't know what's going on with you, but that's not okay. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes cold. Then she turned and walked out. I stayed in that room for a while, letting the silence settle around me. I felt hot and embarrassed, my face burning from the accusation. I left early the next morning. Nana Ruth hugged me at the door and told me to drive safe. Emily didn't come downstairs. My mom waved from the kitchen window. No one asked why I was leaving before breakfast. And I never mentioned that night again. Not to anyone. Not until now. I called my mother the day after Emily told me not to come to the wedding. I didn't plan to. I had spent most of the night convincing myself to just let it go, to stop expecting anything different from people who had never really seen me. But something in me needed to hear it directly, to give them one last chance to prove they weren't completely blind. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was distracted, like she was stirring something on the stove or folding laundry. "Hi, Mom," I said carefully. "Oh, Michelle. You all right?" "Not really. I just got off the phone with Emily yesterday." She made a soft hum, non-committal. "She said I'm not invited to her wedding." "Well, that's between you and your sister." "No," I said. "It's not." "She said it's because I flirted with Gavin." "You were there, Mom. You saw us talk." "Did you really think I was flirting?" There was a pause. Then, she sighed. "Michelle, I think you're reading too much into it. Your sister can be a little sensitive and you know how things looked from her perspective." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "Just maybe tone things down next time. Be mindful. Sometimes you come across a little intense." Intense. I felt my stomach drop. "So you think I did something wrong?" "I'm not saying that. I'm just saying maybe it wouldn't have hurt to be more aware. You're very independent, Michelle, and that can be intimidating." "To who?" "Gavin. He was the one asking me about my job." I answered. "That's not a crime." Her voice tightened. "Look, I'm not taking sides here. I just want peace. Can we not make this into a bigger issue?" I stared out the window at the buses groaning down Ashland Avenue, headlights bouncing off the dirty snow. "It already is a big issue, Mom. You're still family. Just give it time. These things blow over." I didn't say anything. After a few seconds of silence, she said she had to finish making dinner and hung up. I called my dad next. He picked up and sounded half surprised to hear from me. "Hey, kiddo, everything good?" "Not really." "Did Emily tell you she uninvited me?" Yeah. Your mom mentioned something. I figured you two would work it out. She said it's because I flirted with Gavin." Dad chuckled. "That sounds like one of those sister fights. You girls have always had your spats." "This isn't a spat, Dad. She's accusing me of something I didn't do. And now she's cutting me out of her wedding." He made a noise like he didn't know what to say. I could hear the sound of a football game in the background. "Look, you know how Emily is. She's always been high-strung. Don't let it get to you. These things pass." That was it. No defense. No real concern, just another shrug. Another brush off. I realized in that moment how many years I had spent twisting myself into knots trying to understand why nothing I did ever felt good enough for them. Why they never believed me when I was telling the truth. Why they always leaned in Emily's direction even when she was clearly in the wrong. I hung up without saying goodbye. Later that night, Nana Ruth called. She'd heard something from a cousin, one of those second-hand family whispers that spread faster than facts. "I heard you're not going to Emily's wedding," she said gently. I told her everything. The call. The accusation. The way Mom and Dad had responded. I didn't cry, but my voice cracked more than once. There was a long pause on her end before she spoke again. "Sweetheart, I need you to hear me clearly. You didn't do anything wrong. Your sisters always had a way of turning things around. And your parents, well, they've never quite known what to do with someone like you." "What do you mean, someone like me?" "Someone who sees through the game. Who doesn't play along." You've always asked the wrong questions and felt too much. That scared them. So they ignored it. I leaned back in my chair, clutching the phone tighter. I just wanted to be part of the family. I know. But you were never allowed to be unless you fit the version of you they wanted. She took a breath. They let Emily bulldoze everyone. They always have. You've spent your life trying not to cause waves, and now that you finally stood still, they're blaming you for the storm. I didn't speak. I couldn't. You did the right thing walking away, Michelle. I hope you know that. I sat in the silence with her words. They rang louder than anything else I had heard in years. That night, I didn't try to call anyone else. I didn't check social media, didn't open my inbox. I sat on the floor beside my window with a blanket around my shoulders and let the city move on without me. For the first time, I stopped trying to explain myself. And in that quiet, something sharp inside me started to dissolve. ChatGPT darnai. A few days later, one of my regular clients emailed me to cancel an upcoming project. No explanation, just a polite thank you and a note that they were going in a different direction. It stung, but I tried not to overthink it. Freelancing is unstable. Clients come and go. But then it happened again and again. In less than 2 weeks, 3 different clients either postponed or canceled our contracts entirely. Some of them had worked with me for over a year. One of them had just given me a glowing testimonial the month before. It didn't feel random anymore. I tried to convince myself it was just a bad streak. A coincidence. Maybe people were tightening budgets, reprioritizing. But the timing was too perfect. Right after Emily's accusation, right after I got officially erased from the family wedding. I didn't want to believe she'd stoop that low. But then I remembered Christmas. The venom in her voice. The way she looked at me like I was an infection that needed to be cut out. Still, I needed something concrete. I decided to reach out to Trina, a former hiring manager at a publishing startup I'd freelanced for the year before. She and I had stayed in touch occasionally. She was friendly, smart, and had always respected my work. I sent her a casual message checking in saying I noticed her company had paused our upcoming project and asking if there had been any concerns about my performance. She called me the next morning. Hey Michelle, thanks for reaching out. I was actually meaning to talk to you about that. Her voice was warm, but I could hear something else underneath. Hesitation. There've just been some conversations going around. Nothing official. But someone in our extended network mentioned you. It made a few folks here second-guess continuing the project. My stomach dropped. What kind of conversations? She paused. It's not my place to repeat gossip. But it was about professional boundaries. Someone said you were involved in some drama that reflected poorly. Do you know who said that? No names were given. It came up in a meeting and honestly I defended you. I told them I'd only had great experiences working with you. But the team got nervous. You know how it is. I do, I said quietly. She hesitated again. I hate to ask, but is any of it true? What are they saying, that you crossed a line with a client's partner? That there were inappropriate interactions? The breath went out of me like I'd been punched. None of that is true. I believe you. I really do. But once something like that starts circulating, it's hard to put the lid back on. The publishing world's small. People talk. I thanked her for her honesty and hung up. Then I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the floor, shaking. This wasn't just about being cut from a wedding anymore. This was about my reputation, my income, my name. And it was spreading. The realization settled slowly. Emily hadn't just accused me within the family. She had taken her version of the story and planted it where it would hurt me most. In the professional spaces I'd worked years to build. In a city where everyone's connected by 1 or 2 degrees. I opened my laptop and started combing through my inbox. One client had sent a vague message about concerns from their board. Another had simply ghosted after receiving my last round of edits. I archived every message, flagged every suspicious thread, started saving PDFs of every email. I went back and checked LinkedIn. Sure enough, Emily had started following a few of my clients over the past month. People she'd never interacted with before. One of them had even commented on a photo of her and Gavin at a networking event weeks before she called me. She was planting seeds. I opened a new folder on my desktop titled Documentation. Then I picked up my phone and called my friend Lena, who worked at a nonprofit legal clinic downtown. Hey, do you know anyone who handles defamation cases? Why, I told her everything. Not the sugar-coated version, but the ugly, mortifying truth. About Christmas. About the wedding. About the cancellations. About the fact that I was losing work because my sister had decided to smear me out of spite. She was quiet for a moment. I know someone. He's not cheap, but he's good. I'll email you his info. Thanks. Michelle, I'm so sorry. I nodded though she couldn't see me. That afternoon, I wrote down everything I could remember. Every conversation. Every interaction with Gavin. Every red flag. I typed for hours, pouring it all into a document that felt both like a confession and a shield. I didn't know what my next step would be. I didn't know if I could prove what she'd done. But I knew I couldn't let it continue. Emily had crossed a line. And for the first time, I was ready to stop being quiet. That Thursday night started like any other. I just sent off a batch of edits to a client in Seattle and was halfway through heating up leftover pasta when my phone buzzed on the counter. Dad. I stared at the screen confused. Frank Whitman was not a spontaneous man. He didn't call for no reason, and he certainly didn't call me. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again. And again. By the fourth call, I picked up. Dad. His voice sounded off. Rushed. Edgy. Michelle, you need to come to the rehearsal dinner. What, right now? It's happening tonight at the church in Worthington. Gavin says he won't go through with the wedding unless you're there. I blinked, standing frozen with the microwave humming behind me. What are you talking about? He says he refuses to marry Emily unless you're present. He just stormed out of the rehearsal. People are staring. Your mother's trying to hold it together. It's a mess. I stepped away from the microwave, heart pounding. Did he say why? Something about how you were treated. Look, I don't have time to explain. Just get over here, okay? Number what, I'm not coming, Dad. Michelle, she told me not to come. She accused me of flirting with her fiancé, and none of you stopped her. You let it happen. He exhaled loudly, frustrated. We didn't think it would blow up like this. You didn't think at all. Before he could answer, I ended the call. Less than a minute later, Nana Ruth rang. I answered immediately. Honey, are you all right? I'm fine. Did you hear what's going on? I just left the church, she said, breath still catching like she'd hurried through the cold. I didn't stay. I couldn't watch the whole thing play out. But yes, I was there. And you're not going to believe what happened. I sat down at the kitchen table, gripping the phone tighter. It started when Gavin asked calmly where you were. He said he thought you'd be part of the ceremony. And Emily just snapped. Right there in front of everyone. She said loud enough for the wedding party and both families to hear Michelle isn't coming because she flirted with Gavin. My eyes widened, heat rising in my chest. She said that, as clear as day. There was this awful silence. Gavin just stared at her for a full 10 seconds. Then he stood up. What did he say? He said, and I quote, "If her sister flirted with me, I would know. But Michelle didn't do anything wrong. I talked to her, that's all. I'm not marrying someone who lies to isolate her own sister." I covered my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. He told everyone he didn't want to marry into a family that treated people like that. Especially not when the accusations were false. He walked out of the church. His parents followed, so did the best man. The pastor was stunned. The room felt like it tipped sideways. Emily just collapsed into a chair, screaming that you ruined everything. Your mom froze. Frank looked like he was trying to disappear into the pews. No one knew what to do. I didn't know what to say. For once I had no words. Just a storm of conflicting emotions churning in my chest. Nana lowered her voice. He defended you, Michelle. Not because you asked him to. Not because you begged. He did it because he saw the truth, and it mattered to him. That means something. It means everything, I whispered. It was validation. Real public validation. After years of being ignored, Blamed, scapegoated, someone had finally stood up and said, "This isn't right," and not just anyone. Gavin. The man my sister was about to marry. Nana kept talking, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing. What happens now, I don't know. But for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. And I'm proud of him too. After we hung up, I sat in silence staring at the cold pasta still sitting in the microwave. I should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. But what I felt most was tired. Tired of being dragged into emotional wars I never started. Tired of people only seeing the truth when it was too late. Tired of the cost of being quiet. My phone buzzed again. Emily. I didn't answer. Then Mom. Ignored. Then Frank. Voicemail. Then texts began pouring in. From people I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin in Denver. An aunt in Sarasota. A childhood friend who still followed me on Instagram. What's going on? Is it true? Why would you ruin your sister's wedding? You've always been dramatic. Each message chipped at me, not because I cared about their opinion, but because it was so predictable. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't want the truth. They just needed a villain to blame. And I was always convenient. But this time was different. This time someone had refused to play along. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder titled Documentation. I added a new note, the 11th of January 2025. Gavin Thomas publicly withdrew from the wedding rehearsal after defending my integrity. I saved it. And then, without checking my phone again, I unplugged it, drew the blinds, and poured myself a cup of tea. Outside, the snow had started falling harder. Inside, for the first time in a long time, I felt still. I had barely taken 2 sips of tea before my phone lit up again. This time, it didn't stop. 3 missed calls in under 5 minutes, all from the same name. Emily. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the decline button, but something in me, curiosity, maybe made me pick up. Her voice hit me like a tidal wave. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Michelle, please. Please. You have to help me. I didn't say anything at first. I just waited. They're calling everything off, she cried. The venue, the cake, his parents canceled the catering. Gavin's not answering any of my calls or messages. He won't talk to me. He told his mom to handle everything. She won't even speak to me directly now. You have to help me fix this. My heart thudded, but my voice was calm. Why are you calling me? Because you started this. I laughed quietly. I didn't start anything. I didn't ask to be part of your wedding, remember? Just listen, she snapped, then immediately softened. Please. All you have to do is tell Gavin you had a little crush on him. Nothing serious. Just enough to explain why I was upset. If he hears that, maybe he'll understand. Maybe he'll forgive me. You want me to lie? Not lie, she insisted. Just bend the truth a little. Say you used to like him. That you felt something. That you were trying to be subtle, but it got misinterpreted. I sat in silence for a long moment. You realize how insane that sounds, right? I'm not asking for much, she whispered. Just one sentence. Just say you had a thing for him. Just once. I leaned back into the couch, phone pressed to my cheek. Let me get this straight. You told everyone I flirted with your fiancé. You accused me, humiliated me, spread rumors. And now that it's all fallen apart, you want me to rewrite history to save your relationship. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You don't get it, Michelle. I'm going to lose everything. Gavin's family is well connected. His mom has friends on the board at my firm. His father's company co-sponsored my last work project. They're powerful people. If they turn on me, that's not my responsibility. She let out a shaky breath. You think you're so righteous. You think you've won something. But you haven't. You've destroyed me. I raised my voice just enough to be heard. I didn't destroy you, Emily. You did that all on your own. I had one conversation with Gavin at Christmas. One. And you took that and turned it into a public execution. And now you want me to lie to fix what you broke. You could have him, she hissed. If you wanted to, maybe that's what this is about. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly. Emily, this isn't about Gavin. It never was. It's about control. It always has been with you. She was quiet. Then in a voice raw with desperation. I am begging you. I have never begged you for anything. That's not true. You've always begged for attention, for control, for validation. But this is different. This is the first time you're begging because you know you're losing. I heard her breath catch. Then, like a switch flipped, her tone shifted. I gave you every chance to stay out of this, she snapped. But you made yourself the center. You let him ruin me. You let him walk away. I didn't make Gavin do anything. He made his own decision based on how you treated me. That should tell you everything. You don't get it. I will lose my job, my reputation, my future. I wanted to feel pity. Some small ache of sympathy. But all I felt was tired. Welcome to my world. She grew quiet. So quiet I thought she'd hung up. But then she said low and cold, if you don't fix this, I swear I will never forgive you. I almost laughed. You were never planning to forgive me, Emily. Not really. You were just hoping I'd stay quiet while you burned everything down. And with that, I ended the call. I turned off my phone, dropped it face down on the table, and sank back into the couch. The silence afterward was thick but not heavy. It was clean. It was mine. I wasn't the little sister anymore. I wasn't the scapegoat or the strange one or the girl in the background waiting to be allowed into the room. I was someone who finally said no. And no matter what came next, that wasn't going to change. The next morning it began. Voicemails. Dozens of them. My inbox pinged nonstop. Texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin in Arizona. A high school friend who had long since unfollowed me. Even a former neighbor who once babysat me when I was 8. You should be ashamed of yourself. How could you do this to your sister? You've always been jealous. Now look what you've done. Some didn't even try to be subtle. Homewrecker. Snake. Selfish little girl. Each message hit like a slap. Some of them used words I hadn't heard since middle school. One even accused me of planning it all along. I opened Facebook and saw a post in one of the local Columbus community groups. Anonymous, of course, but the details were unmistakable. Not naming names, but I think people should be warned about those who smile at family gatherings while secretly trying to steal someone else's fiancé. Disgusting behavior. Some of us were there. We saw it happen. Hundreds of comments. I closed the app, heart thudding. The world was closing in. I didn't leave my apartment that day. I couldn't. Every time I stood up, a wave of nausea hit me. My hands shook. My skin itched with invisible heat. I sat by the window in my robe, phone turned off, blinds half closed, unable to stop staring at nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. By the second day, the pressure in my chest had become unbearable. I didn't want to call Nana Ruth again. I didn't want to cry in her ear. But when I finally picked up the phone, I didn't even have to explain. Sweetheart, pack a small bag. I'm picking you up in the morning. Where are we going? Anywhere that isn't here. She showed up with hot cocoa and a car already packed with snacks, blankets, and one of those touristy Ohio travel mugs I'd given her years ago. We drove south away from Columbus through winding rural roads that twisted around frozen hills and barren trees. After 2 hours, we stopped at a little cabin near Hocking Hills. Quiet, tucked into the woods, with nothing but the sound of wind brushing over pine needles. I didn't speak much the first day. She made tea, built a fire, handed me a blanket, and sat beside me without asking questions. The second morning I cried. I hadn't meant to. I'd been sitting on the porch watching birds flit between snow-covered branches when the weight of it all cracked me open. I sobbed until my throat burned, face buried in my knees. She didn't try to stop me. She just sat next to me, warm hand resting on mine. It's all right, Michelle. Let it out. By that afternoon, I felt like I could breathe again. The next day, I drove back to the city and kept my long-overdue therapy appointment with Dr. Tori Keating, a therapist I had started seeing just before the holidays. She greeted me with a smile and a cup of chamomile, same as always. Rough week, something like that. Want to talk about it? So I did. I told her everything. About the wedding. The rehearsal. Gavin walking away. Emily's meltdown. The harassment. The calls. The messages. The online posts. I told her about the night Emily called begging me to lie. About how she said I ruined everything. And when I finished, Dr. Keating leaned forward slightly and said, "What's the story you were always told about yourself and your family?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean the role you were given. Every family has unspoken stories. You were the problem," I said before I could stop myself. The weird one, the dramatic one, the too sensitive little sister. And Emily, the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. She nodded slowly. When you challenged that dynamic, even by simply existing, they pushed harder. And now that Gavin saw you clearly, that narrative cracked open. That's why they're angry. You didn't just upset a wedding. You disrupted the story they needed to believe. I felt something click into place. Not sudden, but steady. Like a puzzle piece I didn't know I'd lost. I wasn't just fighting Emily. I had been resisting a system. A long, quiet campaign of dismissal. Of being unseen. Of being blamed for every disruption. I took a deep breath. I think I've spent my whole life trying to earn a place that was never meant for me. Dr. Keating nodded. What would it feel like to stop trying? It would feel like this, I whispered. And in that room, surrounded by warm light and quiet understanding, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit until then. My family hadn't just hurt me. They had defined me. And now, for the first time, I was beginning to define myself. 2 nights later, I received a message that stopped me cold. It was from Nicole Harper, someone I hadn't spoken to in well over a decade. "Hey, Michelle, I know it's been a long time, but I saw what's been going on. I wanted to reach out. I think we need to talk." Emily did something like this to me too. I stared at my phone for a full minute before responding. Nicole had been a grade ahead of me at Worthington High. We weren't close friends, but I remembered her clearly. She was the quiet girl with the sketchbook and long auburn hair, always sitting near the edge of the lunch crowd but never really in it. We'd shared a few classes. She was soft-spoken, artistic kind. The kind of girl people underestimated because she didn't make noise. We arranged a phone call later that evening. Her voice was steady when she picked up, but there was an edge underneath it. A tiredness I recognized all too well. "I'm sorry to come out of nowhere," she began. "But when I saw your name mentioned in some of those posts, and heard what happened at the wedding, I just knew. I've seen this before. From Emily, yeah. Back in high school." She took a breath, then launched into the story. It was junior year. Nicole had been dating a boy named Ryan Kellogg for a few months. He was popular, a swimmer, the kind of guy who smiled with his whole face. Emily had apparently had a thing for him the year before, but he never reciprocated. Still, that didn't stop her from deciding Nicole had stolen him from her. According to Nicole, Emily started small, cold shoulders, odd glances. Then the rumors began. Emily told their friend group that Nicole had been secretly flirting with Ryan while pretending to be her friend. That she had backstabbed her. That she couldn't be trusted. She cried in front of people. Made herself the victim. And it worked. Within a week, Nicole had lost nearly every friend she had. People started leaving sticky notes in her locker calling her a traitor. She got anonymous messages on MySpace telling her to watch her back. Even one teacher who had been friendly before started treating her like a disappointment. She was devastated. But worse than the isolation, Nicole said, was the confusion. Because no one had asked her side. Everyone just believed Emily. "I didn't even fight back," she told me. "I shut down. I stopped going to school events. I stopped drawing. Senior year, I pretty much disappeared. I sat on the floor of my apartment back against the couch, listening with a tight knot in my stomach." Nicole's story was a mirror. And she wasn't the only one. That was the most chilling part. Emily hadn't just gone after me. She had a history, a pattern, a formula. Find someone who threatens her spotlight, twist the story, frame herself as the wronged one, destroy the other person's credibility while playing victim. I asked Nicole why she never spoke out. "Because I didn't think anyone would believe me," she said simply. Emily was so good at controlling the narrative. And back then, I didn't even understand what was happening. I just thought I was too sensitive. That maybe I had done something wrong and didn't realize it. I know that feeling. I hesitated before asking. Would you be willing to put any of that in writing? I'm collecting documentation right now. I don't know what I'll end up doing, but if it becomes legal, I may need someone to speak to her history. There was a long pause. Then Nicole said yes. Absolutely. I'll write everything down. I still have emails, old messages, even a screenshot or two, and if you need me to talk to someone officially, I will. I didn't know what to say. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you. I mean it. You don't need to thank me, she said. I've been waiting over 10 years to be heard. When we hung up, I sat for a while in the dark, the glow from my laptop, the only light in the room. For years I had believed I was uniquely broken. The difficult sister, the emotional one, the black sheep. But now with Nicole's voice in my ear and her story so painfully close to mine, I saw the truth. Emily didn't just have a temper, she had a pattern. She didn't just lash out, she planned, she manipulated. She used social shame as a weapon and dressed it up as hurt feelings. And for the first time, someone else had stood up and said, "Me too." I opened my laptop and created a new folder inside the documentation file. I titled it Historical Pattern. I copied Nicole's messages, transcribed everything I remembered from our call, saved the screenshots she emailed me later that night. She wasn't just a witness, she was proof. This wasn't one incident, this was a cycle. And finally, the cycle was breaking. One morning I stepped outside to head to the grocery store and found my front tire completely flat. Again. It was the second time in a week. I stood there staring at it, grocery list in hand, while the cold January wind bit through my coat. My building's parking lot wasn't large, just 6 assigned spaces behind the complex, quiet, enclosed by a low wooden fence. I always parked in the same spot, backed into the corner where the camera from the alley didn't quite reach. At first, I thought maybe I'd run over something sharp. But 2 days later, it was the rear tire. Same side. Same clean puncture near the valve. No debris around. No nails. Just air gone and rubber collapsing under weight. I called roadside assistance again, biting the inside of my cheek while the guy inspected it. "Clean slice," he said, "real straight, like a box cutter or a utility blade. Someone did this deliberately." I didn't respond. The next night, I came home to find my mailbox covered in brown spray paint. The letters were crooked, rushed. It looked like someone had tried to write liar but only got to LIA before running out of space. I stood in front of it, clutching my keys frozen. The paint still dripped. The following evening, there was something smeared on my front door. At first, I thought it was mud. Then the smell hit me. Rotting food, maybe eggs, and something else. My stomach churned. I called building maintenance to help clean it off, but no one else in the complex reported damage. Just me. Then came the graffiti on the alley wall. Someone had spray painted a vulgar image with my name underneath it. Not my full name, just Michelle W. Equals homewrecker in large red letters, barely visible from the back kitchen window. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I drove straight to the Columbus police station and filed a formal report. The officer was polite but unimpressed. He jotted down the details, nodded occasionally, and asked if I had any witnesses or security footage. I didn't. There were no cameras on the street, and my building's backlot had one old motion light that flickered more than it worked. He gave me a case number and told me to keep documenting anything else that happened, so I did. And then I decided to stop waiting. That afternoon, I bought a full security camera kit. Motion-activated night vision, cloud synced. I spent the whole weekend installing them, one above the back door, one over the parking area, one facing the front step, and a final wide-angle camera mounted just inside the window that faced the alley. I didn't care if it looked paranoid. Because I wasn't paranoid, I was being hunted. And if no one else believed me, I'd collect the evidence myself. 3 days later, I got what I needed. It was a Tuesday night. Quiet, cold. I had gone to bed early after finishing a late round of editing work. Around 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected backdoor camera. I opened the app groggily, expecting maybe a raccoon or a delivery guy making rounds. But then I saw the figure. Hunched, hooded, all black clothing, moving cautiously along the edge of the building. The woman stepped into the frame fully as she crept up to the back entrance. She tried the handle once, twice, then looked around. She knelt briefly, checking under the doormat. And then for just 1 second she turned toward the camera, probably drawn by the tiny blinking red light she hadn't expected. That was when her face came into view. Emily. Even in low light there was no mistaking her. Same sharp cheekbones. Same pale skin. Same dark circles under her eyes. I sat upright in bed, heart pounding, stomach hollow. She tried the door again, then stood there for a few seconds longer before turning and disappearing into the alley. I rewound the footage. Captured stills. Backed everything up in 3 places. I took photos of her frame, her shoes, the reflective strip on her left sleeve, the same one I'd seen on her hoodie the day she moved out of her apartment last year. Then I called Carter Bennett. He had been recommended to me by an old client, civil attorney, former prosecutor, serious but compassionate. He picked up on the second ring. "Miss Whitman, good evening." "Hi. I think I'm ready to go forward." I spent the next 10 minutes walking him through everything. The vandalism, the tire slashing, the graffiti, the threats, the failed break-in. I emailed him all the files, video, photos, written reports, timeline logs. Even Nicole's written statement, which I had notarized the week before. There was a long pause after he reviewed the footage. This is serious. Attempted unlawful entry is a criminal matter. The property damage, if connected, strengthens the pattern of harassment. Combined with your prior documentation and corroborating witness, I believe we can pursue both a restraining order and civil action. Will she be arrested? That depends on the DA. But at the very least, this evidence will force a response. We'll start with a cease and desist and a formal notice. If she continues contact or approaches your property again, we'll escalate. Do you think she'll stop? That's not the question, Miss Whitman. The question is, are you ready if she doesn't? I looked at the screen. The paused image of Emily frozen in grainy black and white, eyes wide with panic. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready now." Carter moved quickly. Within 48 hours, he sent out the formal cease and desist letter to Emily, detailing the full list of incidents, the repeated vandalism, the attempted break-in caught on video, and the history of social media harassment. It was clinical, precise, impossible to misinterpret. A copy was sent to her attorney along with notice that if any further contact occurred, direct or indirect, we would escalate. I expected silence. Instead, we received a response just 2 days later. Emily had retained a new lawyer, someone flashier this time. I imagined him with slicked back hair, a Bluetooth headset, the kind of man who thought intimidation passed for strategy. The letter he sent was polished but condescending. It opened with language about family disagreements, minor misunderstandings, overreactions. Then it pivoted into accusation. It claimed I had been publicly maligning my sister and causing irreparable reputational harm to the Whitman family. It said I had overstepped in a deeply personal matter that should have been handled within the bounds of kinship. And then the final sentence, carefully buried in the 3rd paragraph, Miss Whitman would be wise to cease further actions for the sake of family dignity and long-term reconciliation. When Carter read that part aloud to me, he didn't even blink. "Classic bluff," he said. "Trying to shame you into backing off. They know they're losing." So we filed. First, Carter submitted the criminal complaint to the Franklin County District Attorney's Office, including the police reports, surveillance footage, and photographic evidence. The DA accepted the case and filed 2 charges: attempted unlawful entry and misdemeanor criminal trespass. Then came the civil suit. It included 4 counts: defamation, harassment, property damage, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Carter calculated damages to my freelance business, citing 3 lost contracts, a terminated long-term client, and estimated ongoing reputational loss. The total came to $35,000. I signed the paperwork with a hand that didn't shake. Word got around quickly. A few days later, I received a call from my Aunt Lisa, who lived in Dayton. Her voice was low and disappointed. "You really think dragging your sister to court is the answer?" I hung up. Then came a text from my mother. "This is a family matter, not something to be aired like dirty laundry. You're humiliating all of us." I didn't respond. It was always the same message, wasn't it? Stay quiet. Keep peace. Protect the image. Even when that image was built on years of erasure. Emily's side tried to delay the proceedings, arguing that more time was needed to gather context. The judge denied the motion. The criminal hearing and civil trial were scheduled for the same week in late March. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like bleach and floor polish. I wore navy and gray hair pulled back, a simple silver bracelet from Nana Ruth. She sat behind me with her hand wrapped gently around my wrist the entire time. Emily arrived in a black pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, her lawyer by her side. She didn't look at me. The criminal hearing came first. Carter presented everything in crisp order: first the timeline of incidents, then the security footage. He showed still images where Emily's face was clearly visible during the attempted entry. He read the police reports. He summarized the graffiti, the tire slashing, the mail tampering. Nicole's notarized affidavit was entered into the record. Emily's attorney tried to pivot. He claimed emotional stress. He cited her canceled wedding, her mental health, the instability of family breakdown. He implied without saying that I was being vindictive, possibly exaggerating the harm. The judge was not impressed. Verdict: guilty on both counts. Sentence: 1 year suspended. Sentence: 100 hours of community service restitution for property damage and mandatory behavioral therapy. A no-contact order was issued effective immediately. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was tired. The civil trial was faster. Carter laid out the business losses, the defamation, the harassment, and the emotional toll. He showed how the posts from Emily's friends and her passive-aggressive smear campaign caused quantifiable damage. Emails from potential clients who pulled out, texts from former partners who cited reputation concerns. Emily's team offered a settlement, $10,000, and a mutual silence agreement. Carter declined on my behalf. In the end, the judge awarded me full damages. $35,000 due within 60 days. When it was over, I stepped outside into the parking lot and leaned against the rail. That was when my mother approached. She wore her Sunday coat, the one she always said made her look respectable enough for church and courtrooms. Her expression was tight lips, thin brows drawn in with worry lines she'd never acknowledge. "Michelle," she said softly, "I don't know how you could do this. She's your sister." I didn't speak. She continued, "You know how girls can be. Drama, emotions. These things pass. You didn't have to humiliate her like this. We raised you better than this." Something in me snapped quietly, like a thread I hadn't realized was still holding weight. I looked her in the eye. "You didn't raise me to protect abusers. You raised me to stay quiet, to make peace, to disappear when things got hard. But that ends now." Her face crumpled for a moment, as if I had slapped her. I walked past her without looking back. Justice didn't make me feel whole. But it made me feel real. Visible. Accounted for. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. 3 weeks after the court ruling, I moved out of Chicago. I packed my things in silence with the help of 2 professional movers and the steady rhythm of a playlist I'd curated for that moment. It was called Starting Over. Not subtle, but honest. The apartment I left behind still held shadows. Graffiti had been scrubbed from the mailbox. The tires on my car were new. But the air in that place never felt safe again. My new apartment was in Milwaukee, just north of downtown. It was a mid-rise building with a secure lobby, on-site security, and a concierge desk staffed around the clock. It was walking distance to Lake Michigan and sat across from a bookstore that served lattes with cinnamon foam and homemade almond scones. The first night there, I slept with my windows open and didn't wake once. I started small. I bought a new phone number. I scrubbed my social media presence clean and created private profiles under a shortened version of my name. I kept my email but updated my business website with a contact form that filtered out anything suspicious. Then I did the hardest part. I wrote a letter to my former clients. Each one got a personal email. I didn't go into detail. I didn't talk about court or police or restraining orders. I simply acknowledged that my recent availability had been inconsistent and explained that I had taken time to manage a personal situation involving family conflict and targeted harassment. I apologized if my absence caused disruption. I thanked them for their past trust. I let them know I was open for new work and willing to re-earn their confidence. The responses trickled in slowly, but they came. One client, a local nonprofit in Chicago I had worked with for 3 years, replied immediately. She said she appreciated the honesty and had a new project starting in April. Another said he had already filled the spot but would keep me in mind. 2 others never responded. And then something unexpected happened. I received an email from a small publishing house in Madison, Wisconsin. Dear Michelle, we recently came across a blog post written by a contributor who shared part of your story anonymously. The author didn't name you, but it was clear they were a former client of yours. They spoke of your professionalism, your grace under pressure, and your resilience. We were deeply moved. And we're looking for a long-term freelance editor for several new nonfiction titles. Would you be open to a conversation? My hands shook as I read it. We spoke later that week. The publisher, a woman named Elena, said their team had reviewed my portfolio and wanted to offer a part-time remote contract for at least 6 months. It came with a steady paycheck and the flexibility to work from anywhere. I accepted. One afternoon, I went for a walk by the lake. The wind whipped off the water cold and clean, and I thought about how much had changed in just 4 months. From being gaslit in my own family to sitting on a bench watching seagulls argue over breadcrumbs with nothing in my chest but calm. I hadn't heard from Emily since the verdict. But I did hear about Gavin. Apparently, he had moved out of Ohio entirely. A friend of Nana Ruth said he was back in Oregon working in real estate again. He hadn't responded to any of Emily's calls or messages. Rumor had it he even blocked my parents. When I heard that, I felt something between justice and sadness. He didn't owe them anything. Still, I hoped he was healing in his own way. My mother tried to call, twice. I watched both calls go to voicemail. I didn't listen to the messages. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is not distance, it's protection. Later that night, I called Nana Ruth. She picked up on the second ring. "Sweetheart, how's the new place?" "Peaceful," I said. "I actually sleep now." "I'm glad," she replied. "You sound lighter." I was pacing the kitchen barefoot, a glass of lemon water in my hand. The air smelled like eucalyptus from the diffuser in the corner. I paused by the window and looked out. For the first time in years, I said, "I don't feel like I'm waiting for someone to tear me down." There was a soft silence on the other end. "You know," Michelle, Ruth said gently, "people often talk about forgiveness like it's a door you walk through for someone else. But sometimes it's just closing the one behind you and locking it tight." I smiled. I'm still learning what forgiveness looks like, but I think locking the door was a good start. That night, I journaled for the first time in months. I didn't write about Emily, or my mother, or court. I wrote about walking past a bakery that smelled like orange glaze and cardamom. About the sound of leaves in the wind by the lake. About the way my new apartment felt like a space I had built entirely for myself. I wasn't writing to survive anymore. I was writing because I had space again. Breath, stillness. And even though there were cracks, even though not every part of me had healed yet, I knew something had shifted. I was no longer the girl who curled her shoulders and waited for permission to exist. I was not a victim. Not anymore. The first time I ever felt truly invisible wasn't in high school or even college. It was in the 5th grade during Thanksgiving dinner. Emily had just been awarded something for perfect attendance. My parents beamed as she held up her certificate, and everyone clapped. I remember sitting there with mashed potatoes going cold on my plate, wondering if anyone had noticed the short story I got published in the school newsletter that same week. No one asked. No one knew. That night, when I brought it up to my mom, she gave a distracted smile and said, "That's nice, honey. Now help your sister clear the table." It would take me almost 2 decades to understand that the silence that followed moments like that was not accidental. Now, I live in a quiet apartment on the east side of Milwaukee. It's not fancy. The floors creak a little in the hallway and the heat sometimes clicks in the middle of the night. But it's mine. The lease has my name on it, and the front desk greets me with real smiles, and my mail is never defaced. I can sleep through the night without checking the lock 3 times. Juniper, my silver tabby, has decided the kitchen window is her throne. She perches there every morning to watch the birds in the pine trees across the street, flicking her tail like she's plotting something fierce. I started a habit of writing early before the noise of the day creeps in. Coffee in hand, cat on the windowsill, manuscript glowing on the screen. Some mornings I just sit in the quiet and let it all settle in. What healing actually feels like. I'm currently editing my first full-length manuscript for a small independent publisher in Madison. The offer came after a former client anonymously posted a piece on their blog, defending me writing about what it means to watch someone be torn down unfairly and how standing with them can change the outcome. I cried the first time I read it. I hadn't known anyone still saw me clearly. The manuscript isn't about revenge. It isn't even about Emily. It's about boundaries. About coming back to yourself when everyone else has tried to rewrite your story for you. It's about the quiet dignity of survival and the louder joy of reclaiming space. Gavin never reached out after the hearing, and I don't blame him. I heard through Ruth that he moved back to Oregon and changed his number. He's working again, rebuilding. The last thing he said to Emily at that rehearsal dinner still echoes in my mind sometimes. If your sister flirted with me, I'd know. She didn't. Simple, direct. True. Emily has gone silent, at least for now. Her social media accounts are private. The last post anyone saw from her was a photo of a new journal and a quote about fresh starts. I hope she's getting help. I hope she's sitting with the weight of everything she created and learning to name it. My mother still tries to call. I let it ring every time. Sometimes she leaves voicemails, ones I don't listen to. Ruth said she cried at Easter, telling relatives she didn't understand how I could throw away everything we built as a family. But we never built anything. Not together. All I did was stop patching the cracks they refused to admit were there. Ruth, as always, has remained my lighthouse. She sent me one final letter handwritten on a soft cream card with pressed lavender on the border. I keep it tucked inside the cover of my manuscript. Her words were short but strong. You've become the woman they should have been proud of, and even if they never say it, I see you. And I am proud enough for all of them. Love always, Ruth. Sometimes I read it before I sit down to work just to steady myself. Last week, I submitted the second draft of my manuscript. My editor sent back a simple note: your voice is clean. True, unflinching. You don't write like someone who still needs to prove anything, and maybe that's the best thing anyone's ever said to me. Because that's it, really. I don't need to be understood by the people who spent years misunderstanding me on purpose. I don't need to be forgiven for standing up. I don't need to be small to make others comfortable. I'm no longer the inconvenient sister. The weird one. The problem to fix. I'm a woman who told the truth and survived it. And I am exactly where I'm meant to be. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, if someone you love made you feel like you weren't enough, if you've spent your whole life trying to belong in a place that only wanted pieces of you, I hope you'll leave a comment and tell your story. And if stories like this remind you that you're not alone, subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. There's more to come. Always.